Welcome to this short Q&A on the Madeline McCann case. Can you hear me and see this Hyatt analysis services on your board? I apologize that GoToMeeting has limited the number of the audience. And, I may hold another one for that purpose. I was a little bit overwhelmed by the response, especially from the UK, of how many people have been fascinated by this case, and some things about it that made a lot of sense to me. What I'd like to do is be able to answer questions for you regarding the analysis and with a few announcements, how it works, that sort of thing. Okay, everyone should be able to see the McCann interview transcript screen. You should see my cursor moving. Can everyone see my cursor moving? Okay. If you're having trouble hearing, or if you're having trouble seeing, you might have to restart your computer. It also helps if you have headphones in, but looks like everything is good to go here. Okay. Welcome. I had been contacted by Richard, who many of you are familiar with. I wasn't familiar with, to do the interview on just a analysis I put up a couple of years ago on the McCann case. I never got into the case very much because it was just something that seemed to be almost obsessive with people, where it's almost a no-win situation because the theories that circle around it were extreme at times, and it would mean a long and lengthy explanations on certain analysis. What you see on the blog of statement analysis is not what is submitted to law enforcement, it's not what's done in training. It's very basic. It's just meant really to catch your attention and to interest people in the truth, interest people in studying analysis for their careers, for whatever. So it's like an advertisement for statement analysis and training itself. But it's not, when people enter into training, they're often very surprised what goes on in this particular room here. This is where we do the training, and you're going to see some kind of crazy notes as we go through this and what we were doing, the team I brought through yesterday. A couple announcements. 2020, I filmed 2020 on the Nathan Carmen case. The Nathan Carmen case was a young man who went out for a boat ride, fishing with his mom, and was rescued after, I don't know, a week or so at sea. I think actually 8 days at sea. His mom was missing, and he had called, or the Coast Guard had called him and asked him, hey, what happened? We went into that with analysis, and I found that Nathan Carmen was deceptive about what happened between him and his mom, who is presumed dead now. 2020 had contacted me and put me down to New York, did the taping, and then I got trumped by Trump. It was supposed to air right when the election stuff happened, so that was done. And right now it's in the queue, so when it'll be on, I'll let everyone know. The 2 times that I had announced it would be on, it wasn't. One was the election night, so I'm not going to announce it. I'm just going to wait until they actually have it on, because it's just kind of risky there. But I am going to put out the analysis. Also, some of you may be a fan of CrimeWire. If you remember that program from years ago, CrimeWire is starting up. So I'm actually going to be on CrimeWire, and I'll get the date for you on the blog fairly soon. We're going to cover the Nathan Carmen case. So, and that's actually a little bit related to the Sherry Papini case as well. I can share with you that I was contacted by 2020 on this, and later on through law enforcement on the Nathan Carmen case, which when you see something disappear on the blog, it may mean that I'm involved in the case and I can't publish anything. So that just wipes everything off. I delete it. Or it could be that the investigators have asked that even though it's public information, would you mind deleting it for now? I always delete it. But if I can't discuss a case, or if I seem like I'm avoiding a case, it may be that I have been asked to be involved with the case. So, or I've offered my services, that sort of thing. In the Sherry Papini case, we saw that there was a great necessity for sober-minded thinking. It's a strange case, but he didn't kill his wife, and whether or not he's involved with any type of conspiracy to defraud is another issue. At last check, I believe there was still $50,000 on the table at GoFundMe, and it's a weird case, and some of his language is weird, but by necessity, I avoided it, and if I assist local investigators on that, either formally or informally, I won't be able to post anything, but obviously the news eventually hits the case. Which brings me something really interesting. When someone enrolls in formal training, it's pretty intense stuff. It's not the blog and it's not a couple of books. It's intense training, but they meet once a month here at GoToMeeting, and they work together on a statement. And this is, in a sense, proofing their work. They work diligently, most of them at home. Even those that have attended seminars end up taking the home course anyway, because it's just more valuable to get the lectures and recorded and be able to go that route. Well, they meet here in confidential meetings, and we have them scheduled all throughout the month. We meet here and work through the statements live. So most of the cases, not some of them, but most of them are live ongoing cases where law enforcement has either, through an investigator, asked for assistance, or a law enforcement has asked for us, with no relation to us, to analyze for them. In those cases, nothing gets posted on the blog either. What happens is they work really diligently. They solve the case. They learn who did it, when they did it, how they did it. They submit a report with questions to be asked in the interview and the interrogation process. And the only reward they get is later on they look on the news and they see, wow, this case has been resolved. I was part of that case. They can tell their wives and their husbands and maybe their kids, but they can't publish it and they can't get involved with it because later on you have an appeal process and that sort of thing. So it's tremendously rewarding to do that. Statement analysis is a systematic or scientific method of discerning deception. And what it competes with in terms of that world is the micro-expression training that people get into, body language analysis training, and then handwriting analysis, which I'll just touch upon briefly here as something different from these two. The micro-expression training, I had read Dr. Ekman's work years ago. The training is a scam. It isn't real. It isn't true. And this came to light, I think, almost 2 years ago, where Dr. Ekman said that he would not analyze anyone's case unless he himself conducted the interview. So if there was a video recording where he could slow the screen down and look at the micro-expressions, he wouldn't do it. So if the founder has no confidence in anyone but himself, then how can the trainees who paid good money, and there was a lot of them, do that? And what happens is, when you work a live case, you're not anonymous, you're not guessing, you're not some crazy Facebook psychic. Your name and reputation is on the line. And so if you're going to say, did you see that nose twitch? Well, that person did it. I can tell. And then later on you find out the person had a sinus problem. Your reputation is shot. You're not going to get work like that again. And you'll also be terribly discouraged. So the micro-expression study is fascinating. The training is a scam. And it went Hollywood and a TV show, and the first couple episodes I thought were fascinating, and then it was a 55-year-old man beating up people like Superman in the street. It was kind of goofy. But it's not something that you can rest your hat upon. It's not something you can trust in. Body language analysis is very fluid, very changing. We all use it one way or another, whether we are trained in it or not, but it still does not have the effect that statement analysis has. Handwriting analysis, when someone is trained in statement analysis, becomes something very fascinating. And I'll get to that a little bit later, because I want to go into the McCann thing, but the basis is this. When I ask you, what did you do this morning? You must go into your personal dictionary in your brain, and you probably have anywhere between 20,000 and maybe up to 30,000 words in your brain. When I ask you, what did you do this morning? You go into that brain, you choose the words to tell me what you did. You put the words in a certain order, generally chronological. What comes out first may be a priority or maybe chronological. You have to choose the verb tenses. You have to decide where to place each word next to another word to make sense. And then you choose the pronouns. This entire process takes place in less than a microsecond of time, or a millisecond of time. The brain tells the tongue, and then later on the hand, what to say or what to write in less than a microsecond of time. When someone is deceptive, it means they're going into that dictionary and they have to pause or struggle to avoid revealing what the brain knows. This causes internal stress. Having to go into that vast dictionary, choose all of those words, all of the information, know where to place the words, know what verb tenses to use, know what pronouns to use, all of that in less than a microsecond is suddenly charged with a new emotion, a new hormonal reaction, because the person needs to avoid revealing the truth. This is where deception is indicated. This is why statement analysis has such a very high level of success. This stress is also picked up in the polygraph. Now the polygraph, people love to talk about the polygraph because Silence of the Lambs made it very popular to say a sociopath can beat the polygraph. It's not true. The polygraph picks up that stress. And it's not a stress of a guilty conscience. It is the stress of disrupting that process of experiential memory. And the only way that someone can beat a polygraph is by a poor polygraph examiner. Someone makes errors. And I'll give you an example, two examples of it. One was this. A little girl claimed to be sexually molested by mom's boyfriend. I don't remember her age, but perhaps 10 years of age. She wrote out a statement of what happened. Mom's boyfriend insisted he did not molest her. He wrote out a statement about what happened. The analysis showed that the statements were jiving correctly. Both were telling the truth. But his had missing information at the very point where she was saying she was molested. So I conducted the interviews. I recorded the interview with the child. I conducted the interviews with a joint interview with law enforcement, and he did it. He took a polygraph and passed. And law enforcement said, "Peter, your analysis is wrong." I had taken the analysis and sent it out to others, including instructors, for proofing, and it came back accurate. I said, "No, the little girl was telling the truth. He did it." And he said, "Nope, sorry, case closed. Passed polygraph. He's allowed back in the house." And he reoffended. I learned later on that when we do an interview based on a statement analysis, it's called an analytical interview. I learned later that they asked him about, did you molest her? And in his personal subjective dictionary, he didn't molest anybody. He was tickling. If they asked him if he tickled her in her chest area, for instance, that he would have failed. But he had no connection with molestation. So it's not a sociopath passing. It is it's the examiner's error. It's called contamination. Here's another one that was I mentioned recently on the blog, which was pretty severe. And this is the type of weight I place into statement analysis for even the McCann interview. And I have another interview to pull up for you on this. A man had found his girlfriend and son murdered in his home. He called 911. He reported it. He was investigated by 2 investigators with a combination of 22 years experience in homicide investigations. He took and passed his polygraph. He was cooperative. The coroner was satisfied. The case was closed. I was given the 911 call, which was maybe 3 to 4 minutes in length, and was asked to analyze it with a group of investigators a couple of years ago at a seminar. And my conclusion was that he did it. His motive is greed. His background is going to show not only domestic violence, but child abuse. Whether or not he has convictions, it makes no difference to me. These are things he's done, all in his language. And I didn't know this. I didn't know about this stuff. So when I was asked, how certain are you? I said, I'll stake my career on it. He has overwhelmed me in this 911 call, convincing me of these things. It's not my idea, it's his. He's the one that told me these things. At one point, I'll give you an indication of how this worked. He said, he may have been seeking to get empathy from the 911 operator because he was getting frustrated. And I said, wait a minute. First of all, it's a girlfriend and her son, and they're dead bodies pretty quickly. It's only been, he just discovered their bodies. And second of all, my house? When someone has dead bodies in their house, it's the house. Maybe our house. So, my house? I said, that doesn't make any sense. I said, something is wrong here. There's some kind of greed here. I don't know what it is. I assumed he owned his house. And the cold case investigator was smirking at the time. I looked down and, he didn't share any of the case details with us. And then after the analysis, that's when he gave us the case details. He said, a week before she died, he said to her, I want you to put me on your title deed to the house. And she refused. It wasn't his house. His taking ownership of his house while they're dead people, not people, but bodies in his house, told me something is really wrong. Now, we train investigators to go right after the pronouns, and so they're going to ask those questions. Well, when the investigator brought this back to his department, they said, no, it's a closed case. Talk to the DA. The DA said, I'm not reopening this case. The coroner already closed it out. The only way I reopen this case is if the coroner says he'll change the cause of death. And they asked me if I would send a written report of the analysis to the coroner. Now, the coroner's not going to have training in analysis, so I have to make it almost like blog-like. So I wrote to him. He reopened the case. He changed the cause of death to homicide undetermined, sent it to the DA. The DA read the analysis, reopened the case, and the investigation was commenced from there again with these guys opposing it. He was arrested, and then about a week or so ago, he was convicted in court. He was found guilty. So it was kind of crazy for me personally to put my career on the line. This is how I feed my kids, saying that I'm going up against 22 years experience, a past polygraph, and a closed coroner and DA. That's kind of crazy to do that. That's really risky. But for me, it wasn't, because the words overwhelmed me. We go in with a presupposition of the McCanns. They didn't do it. They did not do it. They are people that are suffering, and their child is kidnapped, and we need to help find the child. It's not a moral exercise, it's an exercise of statement analysis. We go into it presupposing innocence. I presupposed that this guy who called 911 loved his girlfriend and her son and didn't do it. He talked me out of it. He overwhelmingly talked me out of it. When I was asked to teach at the FBI Academy recently, I presented this to one of the classes of advanced investigators, people of high rank. And what I said to them was, at the end, is there any one of you who disagrees with the finding here? And there was not a single dissension. And this included investigators from around the world. There were France, England, Australia, Germany. This was quite a broad class. There was not one dissenter. Even though I had to say to him, by the way, he passed his polygraph. I was able to send an email out last week to the Academy saying, please tell the attendees that are at the National Academy, he was found guilty. So it was very rewarding in that sense. Now, it's not anything special. I have no psychic ability. I'm not a genius. I'm not even a crackerjack investigator. I listen and believe what people tell me. When I go into this training, I often go into it completely cold, so that 6, 10, 12 crackerjack investigators, crackerjack analysts, top analysts from around the country, federal, state, local, will challenge me as I go through it, because we're all working together for the same results. So the McCanns didn't do it. They didn't harm their child. And they are two innocent parents falsely accused who are coming before the camera to help recover their kidnapped daughter. That is my presupposition. They talked me out of it. They overwhelmed me in talking me out of it. And I'll be able to share with you some of the things of how that happened here. Now, if you have any objections to any of the analysis, please feel free. Just, if you see something you disagree with, it's like, I disagree with this point, and then say why. It's good. It's healthy scrutiny for our science. If I'm mistaken, I should be able to go back and find my error. I go in with the expectation and a presupposition. Okay? We say that this expression from Avedon Sapir is the subject is dead to us, the subject is the person, the statement is alive. That's all that matters to us. So in the 911 call here, I didn't know anything about the case other than the allegation. With the McCanns, it was the same way. I didn't know anything when I first did it years ago, didn't know anything about the case. And it's better that way. Now people will go, wow, you know more about a case than the actual investigators. Sometimes it's true. Investigators say that, especially when investigators get involved in training. Then they're really quite fueled, and it's very exciting. But it's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to not contaminate the analysis. And it's very difficult not to put our personalities. Hey, these are medical professionals. But I'm going to share with you some pretty ugly experiences that will suggest otherwise. So we go into it with no belief in guilt. We believe that everything they're going to tell us is going to be true. Everything the McCanns tell us is going to be true. This is going to have a 90% plus success rate. 90% plus success rate. It may seem crazy to do that, but that's how detection is done. Detection is done. Now, when we go through the statement, we're looking for this is called deception indicators, and it's also called sensitivity indicators. So if I say to you, hey, did you kill your child? And you say, did I kill my child? and answer me with a question, it means the question itself is sensitive to you. Now, it could be sensitive to you because you're insulted. It could be sensitive to you because you did it. It could be sensitive for a lot of reasons, but I know the question is sensitive. So we don't rush to say a sensitivity indicator is a deception indicator. We also then look for content. People will often tell us what happened. Even in a statement that someone is deceptively withholding the information that they did it, they often show us how they did it and when they did it and why they did it. No one can really lie. You can rape, you can murder, you can arson, but it's almost impossible to lie in the free editing process when someone's speaking for themselves. So we go through it, and when we're done, once the conclusion is done, we're able to say deception detected or veracity indicated. But now it's done. We now go back to the same statement, the same interview, with our conclusion. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump ahead because most of you have probably heard Richard's interview. By the way, Richard could give lessons on how to conduct interviews to 2020 and a lot of other mainstream media. Did an excellent job. He had opinions that he withheld because he was seeking information. He wasn't seeking a format for his own opinions. He did a really good job. I respect what he did with this. Now, once the conclusion is done, we are now going to go back into the subject, the person, and we're going to bring them to life to us. Now we can have external information, case details, the blood spatter, the forensics, the toxology, all that stuff. But the words that someone chooses to use will reveal 4 things about them: their background, their experiences, their priority, and their personality traits. I had a neat case recently where, sexual assault case where the subject was telling the truth, and I'd indicated her mental health status. I went a little too far. Generally what we do is we won't say this person has oppositional defiance disorder or narcissistic personality disorder. We'll say narcissistic-like, because psychologists get very jealous over going to their field of diagnosing, and I don't blame them. I'm not a psychologist. This time I slipped it out because I was just kind of moving too quickly, and I gave her diagnosis as well as the fact that the sex crimes think she's lying. She's not lying. She's telling the truth. Steve Johnson is a statement analyst, investigator, and he's also a handwriting expert in Arizona. He gave the exact same diagnosis from the handwriting. And of course he has the advantage of the statement analysis as he goes through that, but he was able to show why, and it was done cold. I took his and I took mine, and we submitted it to the investigator, who spoke to the subject's case manager, who opened her file and found her diagnosis was exactly as Steve said it was, exactly as the statement said it was. We were able to not only get justice for her, but we were able to get help for the victim afterwards. So it was just a marvelous victory. It's the kind of thing that makes all the work so worthwhile. So we're going to bring the McCanns back to life. What I'd like you to do, because of the sake of time, and this is not really a training exercise, I'd like you to consider that my analysis is correct. This is my conclusion. I think probably most of you, judging on the generous and kind comments you posted at Facebook or at the blog, agree with that already. If we were doing a training session, this would not be here. You would be open to the possibility of it, but you'd be going in presupposing they didn't do it. I've already done the conclusion, though. So what I'd like you to do is take a look with me at some of the finer points of the analysis, challenge it, then I'll pull up another interview that was done real close to when the child went missing, and you'll see what I mean. On the basis of statement analysis, if you have any questions, just put them here. So if there's anything you say, you know, I'm not so sure about this or about that, it's not voodoo, and it's not magic, it's hard work. if you are at reasonable intelligence and if you have no unresolved acute psychological issues, you can do this work. What I mean by that is we all have psychological issues. If you write your handwriting out for a handwriting analysis, they'll tell you how nutty you are, and I embrace that. It's okay with me. If you have something that's unresolved, it's going to impact your work. Suspicious people are not necessarily bad people. A lot of them have experienced trauma, and they're very suspicious in life. They do very poorly here. It doesn't work unless they can process and overcome that early trauma. And some do successfully. Also, if you are politically correct, you can't do this work. It's not that I disagree with your politics. It's that absurdity or emotion trumping science doesn't work here. We have rape victims who lie. We have so much gray at times to deal with. When we do analysis, we need to know when there's a threat, if it's a man or a woman. And the absurdity today of political correctness, which serves the needs only of a politician, is that there's no difference between the two any longer. And it's goofy. So, and I don't intend this as an insult, although I've been listening for 8 years now at insults. If you don't agree with us, you're obviously a racist. You're phobic. You're full of hatred. There was one person on Facebook that I ended up blocking because he or she just kept posting, stop hating the McCanns, haven't they suffered enough, and that kind of thing. And at first I thought, hey, if you have a disagreement, say so. Yeah, that's the name. I'm not sure if it was a male or female, because I didn't pay attention to the language. But it's goofy. In other words, be silent. If you don't agree with me in the analysis, can you imagine if I said, if you don't agree with my analysis, you're morally decrepit. You're mentally ill for not believing me and my work. So if you don't believe, and whatever the politician jumps on, there's money behind it. If you don't believe it, you're morally decrepit, you're mentally ill, you're unworthy of being heard. So, you can always respond with, hey, stop hating the victim here, stop hating justice. But there's no reason to engage that. And so if you have that bent, we have anywhere between 3 and 5 at a given time moderators who delete comments from the blog. It is terrible work. It really is. It's awful. The baiting of, hey, I don't see any analysis on Donald Trump here. It presupposes that someone is being unfair, and please don't engage that stuff. It's just, we just seek truth, whatever the truth may be. So there's also statistical correlation with same-sex attraction and anonymous threatening letters. It's a statistical correlation that I think some analysts are going to have to stop dropping because they're going to get in trouble. There's going to be protests outside their homes. They get silenced into the loss of freedom of speech, and it is devastating for a society. It really is. So if you have an unresolved mental health issue, as you project yourself into a statement, it's going to come out as skewed. It will go off. If you have an agenda, a narrative, a political correctness, where you think that your emotion or someone's feelings are more important than truth, you're not going to be able to do this. So if someone rapes a woman, and while the woman is being raped, she calls him the N-word, there are people that want to see her in jail for calling him a name more than the rapist going to prison. It's really insanity. It's absurdity, and it's not, there's no place for it here. We have male and female analysts because it's necessary. We think differently, and A couple of the female analysts that I have working with me, they're amazing. Their insight is amazing, and they have a stronger capacity for emotional embracing of analysis. They get into the person's shoes. They do marvelous work. But it's necessary. It's a great balance to have. So as we bring them to life, we're looking at the background experiences, priority personality traits. And this is what I wanted to explore. Is there linguistic concern for sexual abuse in the language of the McCanns? I've already been overwhelmed with deception. They have told me the child is not alive. They have told me they're not and have never been negotiating or looking for the child. There's been no kidnappers. And, I can get down and show you that in their words a little bit as we go along, but this is what I asked the team of analysts last night. Do they find linguistic concern for sexual abuse? Do they have that? And I want to show you their answers as we go along. So, a brief lesson about statement analysis and sexual abuse.